day to you, depending on where you're watching in the world. Good afternoon, good morning, and in case I don't see you, good night. That was from a movie. My name is Deb Pearce, and I am your host of Rainbow Table. Thank you very much for being here. If you don't know who I am, I have a few years in media experience, being on radio, television, public speaking, drag kinging, celebrity impersonation, singing, emceeing, in glad to have you here with us, and today's going to be a great show. Whether you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. I just accepted 2 brand new Rainbow Table Facebook group members like a hot second ago. So thank you and welcome to our 2 newest members. And if you've watched a Rainbow Table before, thank you very much for coming back. We hope that coming into your space, your living room, your kitchen, your car, your home, your phone, your laptop, tablet, whatever you're watching us on, we hope that coming into your home for 30 minutes will help to maybe alleviate some of what feels like a heightened level of loneliness, feeling alone, not necessarily feeling as connected to your 2S LGBTQI communities. So we hope that this brings you some love and joy and happiness and education, which we like to call at Rainbow Table, edutainment. If you're watching this somehow not through Facebook and StreamYard, please join our Facebook group, and we look forward to having you, and there's some great discussions that happen on that group. Are we ready for today's show? Okay. So today we're going to be talking about I guess it's trans inclusion in the military. It's rainbow veterans. So it's sort of it's 2S LGBTQI folks within the different factions of the Canadian Armed Forces. So we have 2 guests today. I'm going to be following up with Todd Ross. So stick around for that. But right now we've got Foss. Now, Kathryn was a member. I'm gonna refer to her as Kat and Kathryn probably interchangeably. But Kat was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces between 1987 and retired most recently in 2019, serving her country for over 32 years. Now, Kathryn is a transgender woman who came out as transgender and began her transition in the fall of 2016. So you can imagine what that was sort of like within those parameters of the armed forces, although she has a pretty interesting story about things sort of happening after she sort of exited out of that. Would you like to meet her and see her? Me too. Let's bring on Foss.
Morning, Deb.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us today at Rainbow Table. What an honor, what a pleasure. Thank you. I know we've spoken a few times with some tech runs and dress rehearsals, and you are just a delight and a joy to speak with. And yesterday we probably could have spoken for hours, but then I was like, no, don't answer those questions yet. I want it to be organic and first time. So thank you so much for joining Rainbow Table today. If any of the folks are out there, you can look in the comment section. And I've cleared it with both guests. If anybody wants to ask a question, if it's respectful and honors Kat, then we can absolutely put that up on screen and potentially get her to answer that question. You can leave loving comments as well. So we're open to both. And gifts. I think gifts would be nice. So, okay. Kathryn, you took part in the Government of Canada Positive Space Initiative. So tell me what that was like for you after all those years of service, and thank you for your service, by the way. Can you tell us more about the the Canada Positive Space Initiative?
Well, this came out of a need, I guess, to help, to find people in the government, in the military, who had similar experiences to me. Because I'll be honest, when I first came out, I mean, some of it was a little bit less obvious, going to the mental health section of our hospital, even talking to my own doctor and whatnot, and asking them, like, do you have any support groups or any pamphlets or whatnot, related to being the LGBT community, being transgender, coming out and all that. And the thing is the answer I got was no. They said, well, we can provide you generic, mental health help service, but unfortunately, they didn't have anything specific to the to our communities.
So if you don't have it, create it, right? I guess.
It was kind of coincidental that around that time, I actually heard about Positive Space, and again, where I heard it from, I don't know. It ended up being, I think it was just another government department, and did what I could do. I mean, you can't really do too much Googling for internal government stuff, but I looked at tried to look up Positive Space and found out that there was there's established programs, but just not in national defense. And I actually, to be honest, other than coming out to my family, the first people I really came out to were people I took the Positive Space training with. An amazing woman, Angie Markowski, worked Correctional Services Canada, set up their program, probably one of the first across the country. But every one of those people I took that course with, they made me feel welcome. They made me feel accepted. I came in there, and I don't typically use my dead name, but I came in there as Kevin, and I left there as Kathryn.
I've never heard you use that name. That's it does feel shocking to use a dead name. I mean, it's your choice to use, but thank you for being so bold and brave to share that.
It celebrates the fact that Positive Space was one of those. It made me feel comfortable to be me, and celebrated my identity.
Look at you in that picture. Look at you. You're growing your hair out. Okay, so peeling back the onion a little bit too, because a lot happened in the 32 years of your service, right? Yeah. And so, everyone has maybe a prejudging or preconceived notion of the Canadian Armed Forces, and the kind of bravado that may occur in those settings. Yeah. Maybe one faction over another, particularly. And you were in the sorry, that's Todd's. You were in the Army, yep. And so the process for you is pretty unique and personal, but it's in your bio, so I know I can start to talk about it. So the evolution for yourself to be your most authentic self started when you made a choice to come out as a gay man, and then you furthered that to the woman that you are today, to that transition. Yep. So how is that unique being within the Canadian Armed Forces than it would be to somebody working in another environment?
Well, I mean, we've brought up that the military is still very misogynistic. It's very, and I hope I'm using words that people understand, but very cis heteronormative. Very much.
Do you want me to break that down? So for those folks who are watching, cis is short for cisgendered, which is that you identify with what is placed on your birth certificate after you're born, and the doctor, what's in between your legs as far as penis or vagina is what you identify with later in life. So that's what a cisgendered person is. Sorry, go ahead.
But yes, the military is very much a cisgender, heteronormative organization, very misogynistic. You benefit. You benefit a lot from male privilege. And I just as a segue, I know Sandra Perron, the very first woman infantry officer, and she and I were doing our final phase of training in Gagetown at the same time, and I recognized that. Even though she was is technically and tactically capable as I was at the time, she had to prove herself more than I did because she was a woman in a man's dominated world. The reality is there's that you have to contend with, and we know from things that are going on in the news with the chiefs of the defense staff that that even that stuff still goes on even as of today. But it's just take that away for a second. But just you've mentioned about my hair a few times. somebody outside of the military, for example, if you want to grow your hair out outside of the military, nobody's gonna say anything. I mean, if you're transitioning and you have a number 2 haircut on the side and the top, if you want to grow it, no way. But in the military, you actually have to ask permission to grow your hair.
Right. Right.
Something as simple as that. Because for a transgender woman, I mean, I'm not saying every trans woman is going to have, grow their hair out long. I mean, they can have a beautiful haircut like yours as well. But the thing is things like the hair, it's part of your identity. And when you actually have to ask permission to grow your hair out to be you, and these are things that still exist even to today, where the regulations haven't caught up to allow any Canadian Forces member to express themselves. And I'm not saying their gender identity, but express themselves, for example, by their hair. So that is one. That's just a good example of how things differ.
Kat, that's wild that I haven't thought of that. And it's the most basic. There's so many movie moments, not that that's paralleling life, but there's so many movie moments where you enlist and you get the, if you're a cisgender male, you get the shave and the hair. Of course, that's a huge deal. So Dennis has a question, if it's okay. I was going to ask you another question, but this may be our last question here. So Dennis, thank you very much for watching today and for your question. Are there different factions in the military that are more accepting than others?
I'm going to stand up for the people in the military, because I for one underestimated their acceptance when I came out. I thought that it was going to be one of the hardest things to do, and I found there was a lot of people, even in the Army, the combat arms, that they were just as accepting of me before as they were after my transition. I will say that I think the environment sometimes helps. You can understand in I'm sure that Todd would be if he felt like taking it on, but even for example in the Navy, the quarters that they have, a lot more limited. It's not like it's easy to have things like gender neutral or toilets for all on ships and whatnot. There can be contention and conflict that arises just from that. The Army, we've already talked, it's very misogynistic, very heteronormative. I have to say the Air Force, I think just simply because their bases and whatnot are further back from operations, they have more support facilities. It's less gung-ho and whatnot. I'd have to say the Air Force is probably a little bit more accepting just because infrastructure, environment, it's less, there's less cause for tension and conflict. But to be honest, I think every member of the Canadian Forces is just as, has the potential to be either accepting or not accepting. So it's again very hard to put them in. As I think just the environment is one of those things that makes the Air Force feel a little bit more accepting.
Well, and then there's sort of the preconceived, there's the culture of it from its inception. And then there's the folks that enlist now or volunteer now. And, you sort of bring that life experience and that open-mindedness or leading with love kind of vibration, regardless of some of that stuff. You're getting a lot of love here. Michelle Douglas says, always proud of Kat and her service to Canada. Also touched to see her wearing the Canada Pride citation. Thank you. Diane says, very proud of you, my friend. You've got a bit of a fan club, and I'm glad that they're watching and supporting you today. Stick around because I want to bring you and Todd onto screen if we've got time a little bit later on. Kat Foss, thank you so much for your service. Thanks for joining us today. We'll circle back to you in just a moment. That's amazing. So much love. No pressure, Todd. I hope you get the same amount of love. I'm going to send you a message because you and I go actually way back, and we've never told each other that we're not going to tell that story, so we'll tell that story. So our next guest is Todd Ross. He uses he and him pronouns, and very interesting story. I'm not going to read the bio to you because I think we'll put it in each other's words together, because he's been backstage for a while. Let's bring Todd Ross onto the screen.
Hey, Deb.
Hi, friend. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for being here. As it says there, you are the chair of the board for Rainbow Veterans Canada. You have a very interesting and very, well, maybe not unique, because there was a few of you in the class action lawsuit, and there's a lot of people that have experienced the level of phobia that you did. But your story is you volunteered for the Canadian Navy in 1987. That was a hot minute ago. At the age of 18, and just before your 20th birthday, it was just your birthday, by the way, happy belated birthday by a few weeks. Just before your 20th birthday, you were investigated by the Special Investigation Unit of the Military Police. Now, why, after just under 2 years of volunteering with the Canadian Navy, would Todd Ross get investigated?
Well, that's not an answer that I actually have available. I really don't know how it started, but you know, I found out one day when a couple friends came up to me independently and said, the Special Investigation Unit of the Military Police were on the ship asking questions about you, and that's sort of how I found out I was under investigation.
And the questions about you were in regards to how you identified with being a gay man, or the suspicions of being a gay man?
They were actually very security focused. So when it started out, it was things like, how loyal was I to the country? Had I ever traveled to the Soviet Union at the time? So very. It started out, I believe, as an investigation into security.
Okay, and then all right, so that's terrifying. And you're a young person at that time. You're about 20 years old. That's a really fast forward into like a very scary, insecure sort of moment, especially when you're potentially on a ship in the middle of wherever doing training. You know, where do you go to? What do you do? What did you do when you found this out? You obviously answered the questions.
Yeah, and it was, you know, it ended up being a long process. It was an 18-month process. I was called in numerous times. Canada at the time did have a death penalty under the Official Secrets Act, so kind of had that weighing over my head. And you know, as the questions went on, I was asked to do a polygraph exam, a lie detector test. And on the lie detector, one of the questions was, "Are you gay?" Which I was horrified by, because I hadn't even come out to myself.
Right. So how did you answer that question?
I actually, the first test, I think it was because I was so nervous. The first time I did the polygraph, it came out inconclusive. When they asked me the question, "Are you gay?" I said no. Mind you, in my head, I immediately responded yes, and then I verbally answered no. So I think it came out inconclusive. And then they said, "Well, we want you to do another polygraph exam because this one was inconclusive." At that point, I said no, and that just continued to drag it out. So, which is part of the reason why it went on for 18 months, is there was a 6-month period where I would not cooperate with them. And they continued to follow me and continued to ask me to come in. And then finally I said, "Okay, I'll just leave me alone. I'll come back and answer your questions."
Todd, what kind of support did you have in that time? Again, going back a few years to being 18, 19, the early 20s, who can you talk to about this stuff, if anybody?
Absolutely nobody. Yeah.
Right.
So because I was in the closet, I wasn't able to disclose to anyone what I was going through. My friends who were outside of the military police told me I should not talk to them. So I was kind of put into this isolation where there was nobody to reach out to. So it was all things that I had to deal with on my own.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I think about myself at 18, moving from Peterborough to Toronto, literally not a care in the world except for, am I going to, turn the TV on and have cable or not, because I haven't paid my bill. Like what an atrocious, appalling experience that you had. That's terrible. Diane is chiming in. You have love. Thank you, Todd, for your service. Thank you for representing RVC. Yay, Diane. Thank you. Okay, so fast forward to 2016, and you were one of 3 people to launch a successful, I might add, congratulations, class action lawsuit against the Canadian government for the decades of systematic discrimination and harassment. So that's a bit of a time frame between 1987 and 2016. So did you, in that time, was there any service of the military, or did you walk away? Were you kicked out?
Yeah, so I was basically kicked out in 1990. I was offered an honorable discharge, which I took. So that meant the investigation was over. I signed some papers. They gave me a nice little honorable discharge. I walked away and didn't look back. I like to joke that the only time I put on my uniform in that whole period was when I was waitering on Church Street, and the tips were great.
Yeah, there is something about a person in a uniform. And just to go back a little bit, that's how Todd and I know each other, from working together on Church Street many decades ago. Michelle Douglas just sent some love on the screen. I want to read it. Todd Ross is a Canadian hero. He's worked for decades to make change happen and to get justice for those experiencing the LGBT purge. So you're getting lots of love today. All right, so we were talking about how that, so the only time you put on a uniform was for role play, for serving on Church Street. And so tell us briefly about that class action lawsuit. How did you and the 2 other folks find each other to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It came about with the change of government, really, when the current government was elected, that there was an opportunity. And EGAL was very involved with the beginning, as was Douglas Elliott, who was my lawyer. And Douglas and a number of people worked together to create the Just Society report that was sponsored by EGAL. And the Just Society report put together a number of recommendations for the Canadian government about past wrongs within Canada. There was a press conference in Ottawa, which I spoke at, and I spoke about my experience in the military. And then shortly after that, we realized that the government wasn't moving fast enough. So I started the class action lawsuit in Ontario, and Martine Roy started the class action lawsuit in Quebec, so the 2 legal systems within Canada, which covered all of Canada. And then we were... a 3rd class action started in Nova Scotia with Alida Satalik, and then the 3 of us joined into a federal class action lawsuit. So I must say, thank you to the lawyers who worked so hard on our behalf. Thank you to the Canadian government for some very strong and expedited negotiations for the class action lawsuit, which ended up resulting in the class action lawsuit being settled within 2 years, which is record timing for Canada.
So when you talk about a class action lawsuit, so that's very personal to you and the 2 other folks. Was there ingrained in that some systematic administrative changes, human resource changes, policy and procedure changes that had to be initiated or come about as a consequence to that? Or had that already sort of been starting to come to fruition in the 90s and 2000s?
Well, certainly our friend Michelle Douglas, who's watching and commenting, was the one who really brought about change within the Canadian Armed Forces back in the early 90s when she was kicked out, and it's her story. But when she sued the Canadian government, and that resulted in a change in policy for the Canadian Armed Forces. Mind you, it's a big ship and it's slow to turn around. So it took a long time for the military to adapt, and we continue to see right up until 96, when there were changes in the human rights legislation. We continue to see discrimination and harassment within the armed forces and other government departments. With the class action lawsuit, there were a number of conditions that were put that the government agreed to, which was the result of the LGBT Purge Fund, which again is another kind of whole piece. But it includes things like the public apology that happened by the Prime Minister. It includes pieces like a national monument for all 2S LGBTQ plus people, which will be in Ottawa. A museum piece that's going to be at the Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg, and some other pieces like reviewing the training within the armed forces and looking at those historical records.
Fantastic. Always room for progression and change. I want to talk to you for a really long time. I'm glad you got that love, and I'm glad that you gave Michelle Douglas some props. I wanted to also say that Todd Ross comes to us today from St. Andrews, New Brunswick, where he lives with his partner Kirk, and Todd is Métis. Thank you very much for joining today. Let's bring Kat back on so the three of us can share a moment together, if Kat's still available. There you are. Kat and Todd, you've got Kat Foss and Todd Ross. I feel like I should change my name to Bob Ross or something. I don't know, today to fit in. Thanks very much. So the two of you folks, we met a few times. Do you have an occasion to have to work together or speak with each other or confer within what you're doing, and how, and if so, how so?
Yeah, so I'll start. So Kat and I are both members of the Rainbow Veterans Canada, which is an organization that was started a couple years ago to educate and advocate on behalf of 2S LGBTQ plus veterans. I'm thrilled to be working with Kat, among others, on the board, so that we can really bring pride back into those of us who are 2S LGBTQ plus, who served. There's often a division when you're in the military. Historically, you couldn't talk about being gay. When you're gay, you couldn't really talk about being in the military. So Rainbow Veterans Canada is there to bring us all together in a nice, warm embrace.
I love it. I love it as the co-chair. And so, Kat, is there anything that you would like to, before we sort of wrap up today with this amazing episode, educational, entertaining, edutainment, as my colleague Wes likes to call it. Kat, is there anything you would like to add to this discussion that we need to know that maybe us civilians don't know about?
I guess the only thing I wanted to say, and I've talked about this with Todd and the other members of the board, that there are some of us that were affected by purge. Like, I was affected by it because I was basically asked at the recruiting center if I was gay, and of course, you know, I felt that all the way through my career. But I served for over 3 decades, and being in the military for all that time, it's as much part of my identity as being Kathryn, as being a woman, as being transgender. So and I think that was one of the really great things when I was asked to be on the board. I'm the membership chair, and working with these great people, because I mean, I bring in a slightly different perspective, because I wouldn't say I didn't suffer my whole career. I continued on, and I actually have like good memories of having served. So that's just as much part of my identity. And I think that's something to bring out to the public, that not everybody that served in the military and is part of our community has a lot of bad memories. So.
And you know, and that's a great sentiment to sort of almost leave this on. Although we did squeak it. Somebody squeaked in another question. If Jonathan, you want to put that back on, and I suspect it's because of some of the courageous folks that have come before you that have sort of helped to pave that way and make those changes, like any organization or establishment. So kudos kudos to them. And I'm glad that you had a livable work experience. Finally, because the questions are coming in like rapid today, which is great. P-Flag Canada from Victoria, BC. So good morning to you. Thanks to you both, Todd and Kat. Do you have any advice and resources for, in their acronym, LGBTQ2+ members of the armed forces who are considering coming out? Just briefly, can one of you feel like you can tap into that answer? Or is this bordering on advice that you're not comfortable with? If you're comfortable, answer.
No, this is perfectly good. The reality is there are now, like, if you want to say, 2 resources in the National Defense and the Canadian Forces. You do have Positive Space. There is a Positive Space initiative, so that's like peer support within our community. They can help point you towards resources that do exist and whatnot. And again, you can get help from civilians or military, whatnot. The other is the fact that I actually was the founding chair of it, but the Defense Team Pride Network, and it has a very similar role to what Rainbow Veterans is, but within the serving military. So they educate, advocate, and whatnot, and it's volunteers, just people like us that take on systematic issues, systematic barriers to members of our community, because we actually now have the community does actually have a formal voice as an advisory group now in national defense. So yes, you can look at those. It's the Defense Team Pride Network and Positive Space. You should be able to find those on the DWAN.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And what I might do is, when we load this up on the egal.ca website, and then we also load these videos up on the Rainbow Table Facebook page, what we can do is potentially give those resources out there to folks that may not have written that down. We'll put some backlinks up there so people can have a quick view at those. Todd Ross, Kat Foss, thank you so much for being part of today's amazing show. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, and happy belated to you, Todd. Kat, when's your birthday? I feel like I'm leaving you out.
December. It's okay. I don't want to.
Really happy belated. Happy belated. Thank you so much for joining Rainbow Table, folks. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
All right, that wraps up the show today. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your questions. That means so much. Thanks, Diane. I got some love too. I mean, thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I'll pay you later. Thank you. It really is truly my pleasure to do this hosting job for Rainbow Table with the Gal. And it's a really, really special thing to be able to, thanks, Dennis, be able to come into your homes and make you feel connected to the 2S LGBTQI communities. And because I know this is a really weird time. So thanks for letting me into your homes or cars or workplaces, if you're watching at work. And as I finish every show, there's always a seat for you at our Rainbow Table.